Okay, so again, a warm welcome to all of you for the third session in Gita Sandesh. Today's chapter, which is chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, is titled Karma Yoga. And this Karma Yoga is an interesting chapter because there is a direct connection between chapter 2 and chapter 3 on two levels. One is that once you understand your identity, rather, you have to understand your identity in order to understand what your duties and responsibilities are. On the other hand, there is also another connection that we will go into today, which is the trajectory of chapter 2, which we did not have time to look at yesterday. Maybe briefly we can look at it today. And there are some questions that Arjuna asks in chapter 2. And there are answers that Krishna provides. How the answers provided by Krishna ends up confusing Arjuna a little bit. So chapter 3 also begins with a question. So at the outset, you could say the single word summary for today's chapter is going to be duty. Or maybe put in another way, job description. You know, if you're applying for a role, that role comes with a job description. So if you have, the many preachers use this phrase, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Because the spiritual personality has had non-human experience as well. So that kind of flips the coin in terms of, are you a human being first or are you a spiritual personality first? So you're a spirit soul first because that's the only thing that exists. You just change different clothes along the way. Therefore, we can rightfully say we are a spirit soul having a human experience in this life. We were spirit souls in our past lives too, and we will continue to be spirit souls in our future lives too. It's just that we don't know if we will have the fortune of having a human experience again. Of course, we pray that we will have that human experience by becoming devotees of Krishna. But I thought that's a nice way to look at it, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So how does chapter 2 begin? Chapter 2 begins with Sanjaya saying Arjuna is thoroughly dejected and does the most unthinkable thing, puts down his bow and sits down on his chariot, feeling completely dejected with tears in his eyes and completely confused. And then Arjuna is chastised by Krishna saying, you know, you've spoken some big words, given big reasons why you shouldn't fight, all seems very, very philosophical, etc. But actually, you don't know what you're talking about. So that relationship of being a friend with Krishna continues with Arjuna presenting his arguments a little bit more, saying, I actually do not know which is better, being conquered by my enemies or me conquering them. And in that mood, Arjuna in Sloka number 7 says, Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. So the mood has shifted slightly, or maybe radically, depending on how you look at it. So you can complain to a friend, right? Friends listen to you very patiently. You can have endless complaints about life, and friends will just quietly listen. Maybe here and there they will throw in some advice or console you. When we encounter difficult situations, what happens is that we have a tendency to consult a lot of people, you know, We'll consult our family, we'll consult our friends, because we want to know, do they have a solution that I have not thought about? So in that anticipation of somebody giving you that magic pill that's going to take away all your troubles, you talk to a lot of people and get a lot of advice. The reason we're discussing this is the mood change here, a slight mood change from friend to student. So when we consult a friend, we're not obliged to follow what they say. Friend A may give you one kind of advice, friend B may give you another kind of advice, your family may give you a totally different advice. You are free to accept or reject all of them. So you may partially accept someone's advice and partially accept someone else's advice. But keep in mind, when you have a relationship of friendship, there's nothing that forces you to accept that person's advice. You're not obligated in any way. Hence, Arjuna approaches Krishna like a student. Because once you approach a guru for advice, there's no friendly talks. Once you seek the counsel of guru, you have to follow his instruction. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, you'll be unnecessarily wasting time of your guru. Which is why Arjuna says, I'm a surrendered soul unto you. Please help me. I think the question was asked that this concept of surrender we talked about, it takes courage to acknowledge that you have a weakness, that you don't know all the answers to life's problems, that you are not all knowledgeable. And at the same time, it requires humility on two fronts: humility to accept your weaknesses, and humility to know, to be ready to approach someone else for their wise counsel. Why? Because if you are filled with pride, it prevents you from learning. A person who is very proud, they cannot accept new information or information that is contrary to their experiences or to their belief systems. When you approach a guru, definitely there cannot be pride in your heart. Because if you approach an exalted personality with pride in your heart, then they may set you straight right away. Or they may just not be willing to give you the kind of help that you're seeking because they already know that you're not ready. There's a very famous Chinese saying, right? When you approach a master, empty your cup. Even if there is a little bit, even if your cup is half full, you're not ready to receive knowledge, which means when you're approaching a guru, you have to get rid of all your old past notions, which may be inaccurate, incorrect, etc. So you have to be ready to unlearn in order to relearn. Therefore, if Krishna has to reprogram Arjuna's mind, then Arjuna has to empty his mind of all so-called knowledge that he thought he had acquired, so that he's ready to accept new knowledge. So pride prevents us from accepting new knowledge or knowledge that is contrary to our belief and value systems. Therefore, Arjuna says, I'm a surrendered soul. Therefore, the relationship has changed from friendship to guru and student. One of the meanings of the word guru is heavy. And as you can see, when we read some of the shlokas yesterday, that Krishna was not very mild with Arjuna. He was quite harsh with Arjuna. Heavy means chastisement. Guru means heavy, heavy means chastisement. Chastisement means the willingness to be corrected upfront. And sometimes pride makes us, actually, not sometimes pride always makes you stubborn. So when you're stubborn, how can you? There's no opportunity to listen. But here, Arjuna is ready to listen. So all the friendly talks are over and Guru is ready to speak. And Krishna warns Arjuna that the kind of philosophy he was talking is actually going to harm him, harm his reputation. And for a warrior, dishonor is worse than death. A warrior prefers to die on the battlefield than to be insulted. And in this context, there is a very nice pastime in the Mahabharata. When Karna injures Yudhishthira on the battlefield, Yudhishthira withdraws from the battlefield to seek medical attention. But when Arjuna finds out that Dharmaraj has been injured, he becomes so worried. He leaves the battlefield to come and check on Yudhishthira to see if everything was okay. But when Yudhishthira sees Arjuna, he's overjoyed. So, what was Yudhishthira's expectation? That Arjuna has killed Karna and has come to give the good news to Yudhishthira. So, Yudhishthira asks Arjuna, so have you killed Karna? Is that why you've come to tell me this? And Arjuna says, no, I just came to check on your well being. And Yudhishthira is so disgusted and so angry. He says, you call yourself a Kshatriya, you better give up your Gandiva bow because you're not fit to fight. Now, this is an insult. A Kshatriya has a hard time accepting insults. As I was saying yesterday, Arjuna in reality wanted to go off into the forest and I guess practice Jnana Yoga. But then, and he has to beg. And a Brahmana knows that when he begs, he may not be treated well. Doors may be slammed shut on his face. Not everybody may be kind and giving. So, even though he wanted to go into the forest, if he has to beg for alms and if he's insulted, then his inner Kshatriya nature will come out. Naturally, it will come out. So here, this inner Kshatriya nature of Arjuna came out because he had taken a vow that anybody who insults him and asks him to put his Gandiva bow down, he has to kill them. So now he was in a quandary. He was upset and insulted by what Yudhishthira had said, and at the same time he was wondering, I had taken this vow, now I have to kill my older brother. At that time, Krishna happens to stop by and he says, actually, you can't kill your brother, come on. And for a Kshatriya, dishonor is worse than death. So just insult your older brother a little bit and your score will be settled. You don't have to kill him, just insult him. Sure enough, Arjuna insults Yudhishthira. And after the insults are over, he immediately drops at his brother's lotus feet and begs for forgiveness. So here, Krishna is warning Arjuna that dishonor and disreputation is going to follow him forever. long after his death, he will be known for leaving the battlefield, a great warrior who left the battle. So Arjuna's inner motivation was to avoid this conflict. And through this process, we discovered where Krishna talks about desires. And desires can, depending on the type of desire, desires can either elevate you or they can degrade you. You can look at it from two angles. How can a desire elevate you? If you have noble desires, then it can elevate your consciousness. If you have ignoble desires, it can degrade your consciousness. And consequently, you will also feel this from a karmic effect as well, which we will talk about today, is karma yoga. If your desires are not aligned to Shastra or to the Lord's instructions, then not only are you degrading yourself in this life as a human being, in your next life, you certainly will have less of a chance of taking on a human body. So the degradation is not just a degradation of your consciousness in this life, but because of the degradation of consciousness in this life, it dictates the next body in your next life. Therefore, Krishna says, be careful of your desires. And in that context, he talks about lust, anger, greed being our enemies. And as long as there is lust, there is going to be fear and lamentation. And the solution to this is to begin by regulating the senses. And in that context, we have to understand the 6 enemies that we face, which is Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. So these are things that Krishna is requesting us to be very conscious of, because this decides whether your consciousness is being elevated or degraded. If you succumb to these 6 enemies, then of course your consciousness is being degraded. So coming back to this concept of guru, from a guru, we have to listen, learn, and apply. So listening requires patience and attention. Learning requires patience and attention. And applying it also requires you to use your intelligence to see if what you're putting into application is actually helping you or working for you. And we will not get into the difference between the body and the soul, because that is something that we have spoken about already in detail yesterday. But there are some critical shlokas that we would have covered at a very high level. We didn't get an opportunity to go deeper into these shlokas. And I thought I will take the opportunity to do that today. So let me share my screen. And let's go to chapter 2. Some shlokas that we can look at very quickly, and then we can start chapter 3. So Krishna talks about the benefits of fighting. Now you would think non-violence is ideal. Why should we unnecessarily kill? But then killing is authorized for a Kshatriya, not for a Brahmana. So let's look at a few shlokas today before we move to chapter 3. So up to shloka 30, I think Krishna talks about the soul. Yes, so let's come to shloka number 31, where Krishna is instructing Arjuna, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation. So Krishna is saying you need not hesitate to fight because, first of all, you are occupying the varna of Kshatriya. For a Kshatriya, upholding dharma is the most significant duty for them. And in order to uphold dharma, sometimes uh, fighting a battle is necessary. So Arjuna should not hesitate to fight, even though the other side may be comprised of his family members. So Krishna is saying, remember, you have a specific duty as a Kshatriya. And as we discussed yesterday, the emphasis throughout the Bhagavad Gita is dharma as opposed to karma. Yeah, one should be cognizant of how karma actually operates in our life, but one should be very, very cautious about um, intentionally or unintentionally ignoring our dharma. So Krishna says, "O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets." Meaning, a Kshatriya is born to fight. But, wars may happen once in a lifetime, right? Generally, in other yugas, maybe wars were not that common. Maybe in Kali Yuga, wars are happening at the drop of a hat across the globe. There is always some huge conflict going on somewhere on this planet Earth. But imagine a soldier has to continue to practice and practice and practice in the hopes that one day he will be able to utilize his skills in an actual war. Until then, the soldier has to relentlessly keep himself ready in case a war happens. And therefore, when the war happens, the soldier is most happy because finally he has an opportunity to test what he has been learning all his life. Hence, Krishna is saying, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, which means Arjuna and the Pandavas didn't seek this fight. It was foisted on them through deception and other means. They didn't have a choice. And then Krishna says, if, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So Krishna is again emphasizing that for a Kshatriya, their reputation is very important. And walking away from the fight is more sinful than fighting and killing. So Krishna is saying you actually don't have a choice. You have to fight. Because if you don't fight, you will incur papa for neglecting your duty. By the way, this instruction applies to you and me as well. You and me we may not be Kshatriyas, irregardless whichever of life that you're in, whichever varna and ashrama that you're in, we all have to perform our duties. Otherwise, we incur the sin for not performing those duties. And as if to rub salt into the wound, Krishna says, people will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? So Krishna is driving home the point that even though Arjuna wants to leave the battlefield, he's going to suffer even worse consequences after leaving the battlefield. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. So the Shloka 37 is called the profit and loss calculation for Arjuna here. We talked about how if he wins the battle, he wins. If he loses his life, also he wins. And this is that shloka. So Krishna is saying there are only two options. Either you'll be victorious and enjoy this wonderful earthly planet, because whoever was ruling at that time was actually the ruler of the entire world. But in case you die, no harm done, you'll go to the heavenly planets. Therefore, get up with determination and fight, Krishna is telling Arjuna. So in this shloka, Krishna then says, okay, let's say you're not ready to view this profit and loss calculation. Because Arjuna has already said, I don't care for the kingdom. Even if I win this earthly kingdom, it's, even if you give me the three worlds, and even if you make me richer than the demigods, I don't care. I don't want. So then Krishna says, so let's say Arjuna is not interested in this profit loss calculation. So what is Krishna doing step by step in these shlokas? He's using different angles to convince Arjuna that he should fight. So Krishna also speaks a little atheistic philosophy in this particular chapter. That specifically comes in shloka 26. He's saying if you believe that only the body exists, let's say you don't believe that the soul exists, then what's the big deal? Everybody is going to die anyway. That's a reality that nobody can change. So from atheistic philosophy, then Krishna comes to Karma Kanda, which is the shlokas that we just read now. If you win, celebrate, enjoy. If you don't win, you die, go to the heavenly kingdoms and celebrate, enjoy. So Krishna is using different, you could say, lenses to coax Arjuna that he should actually fight. Then Krishna uses one more lens. He said, let's say you don't care about anything that I've said right now. Krishna says, do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you shall never incur sin. Krishna is saying, you are worried about sinful reactions? No, don't worry about anything at all. You just do your duty, Arjuna. Don't worry about what will be the consequences. Whether they will be killed, you will be killed, whether you will be victorious, they'll be victorious, who will be happy, who will be unhappy. He says, if you simply do your duty and don't care about anything else, essentially Krishna is saying here, be attached to your duty and don't worry about the results, which will become the core for chapter 3, Karma Yoga, which is fight for the sake of fighting, because that's your duty. So up to now is Sankhya Yoga section of chapter 2. We said chapter 2 is also a good summary of the Bhagavad Gita because all the 3 yogas are covered here in this chapter. So Krishna concludes by saying, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results, O son of Pritha. When you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of work. So now Krishna is going to talk about why Arjuna should fight, but using a completely different lens now. So this lens, you could say, is begins the Buddhi Yoga section of chapter 2. You and me, we may not have heard of the term Buddhi Yoga before. Karma Yoga, yes. Jnana Yoga, yes. Bhakti Yoga, yes. But what is Buddhi Yoga? There's an element of Sankhya Yoga and an element of Bhakti Yoga in this particular section. The Bhakti Yoga section is this two shlokas. In the sense, the Buddhi Yoga section is from shlokas 39 to 53. And within that, 40 and 41 are a reference to Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna says, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Just do your duty, do it because I'm asking you to do it. You will make advancement, spiritual advancement. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Gurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. And then Krishna says, comes back to talk a little bit about those who are attached to results. He critiques them. And in the sense that there are some personalities who believe that life is all about enjoying oneself. That's by following the Vedic injunctions, of course, which means you're staying within the track of the Vedic scriptures. So you're using the Vedas just to enjoy yourself, just to make sure you get good power, good birth, etc. That's what Krishna says. So some of these people, Krishna says, they are too addicted to sense enjoyment. And when they're too addicted to sense enjoyment, they become bewildered. And when they become bewildered, they have no attraction towards the Lord. Therefore, Krishna is saying the determination to perform devotional service to me does not take place. Krishna briefly talks about Prakriti, which will actually come in the third section of the Bhagavad Gita, the last 6 chapters. Krishna says the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature. And here, Krishna is already giving away the secret. He's saying, Arjuna, you need to transcend even the Sattva Gun and come to the Shuddha Sattva state, or what is called the Vishuddha Sattva state, where you are freed from all dualities. And therefore, there is no more anxiety, and therefore, you are already liberated because you're fully established in yourself. One more analogy that was not on the slide yesterday, all purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. Remember, one of the reasons that Arjuna gives as to why he cannot fight is that he will cause destruction of family traditions. That he himself will be violating dharma by destroying community projects and the concept of degradation of women, etc. And in this regard, Krishna is saying, actually, don't you know the essence of the Vedas is actually to serve me. So if you serve me, which is the great reservoir of water, then the smaller wells, like different small family units, countries, states, earthly planets, bigger planets, etc., everything gets satisfied and fulfilled. So all purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. So Krishna is saying the purpose of you, even if you are interested in karma kanda, The purpose of studying the Vedas and following the Vedic scriptures is to actually come back to me and worship and come back to me by worshipping. And if you worship me, everything else, all of your other prescribed duties is automatically taken. Very famous verse of Karmanyevadhikarasya in 47. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of the action. So Krishna says, perform your duty, be attached to your duty, but be detached from the results. Very hard to do. Because we are always focused on the outcome. We're always focused on the goal, whatever the goal is. And when we set the goal, we try to achieve it to the best of our ability. And if we don't achieve the goal, we become very disappointed. But here, Krishna is saying that's fine, you can set goals. Go after it. But don't worry whether you've achieved it or not. That achievement is not in your hand. So never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. And at the same time, never be attached to not doing your duty. It's a double negative sentence used here or phrase used here. Essentially, Krishna is saying never ever put yourself in a situation where you become irresponsible when it comes to your duties and responsibilities. So Krishna says, perform your duty, abandon all attachment to success or failure. If you're able to do this without attachment of whether you're going to win, whether you're going to lose, who's going to die, etc., that itself is one yoga. Now, we come to the crux for the connection to the next chapter. So then Krishna says, O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service. And in that consciousness, surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. We said Brahmanas are considered to be generous. The opposite of Brahmana is a Kripana. So Krishna is saying, don't be a Kripana. Don't try to enjoy the fruits of everything that you do. Krishna has also said here, perform devotional service. By performing devotional service, avoid all abominable activities. And this creates a terrible confusion for Arjuna. There's one statement here, which Arjuna will seek clarity in the beginning of chapter 3. But in the meantime, because these are called the Sthita Prajna verses, from Sloka 50 onwards, Krishna is talking about those kind of men who are such great devotees of the Lord that just by being devotees, they have gotten rid of all their karmic reactions in the past. So Krishna says a man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries. Krishna is saying, when my devotees do devotional work to me, these great sages, great devotees, they've exited the material world. They've kind of become detached from the material world. So now, first Arjuna will ask, who are these kind of people? Can you explain them to me? How do they walk? How do they talk? So Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the symptoms of the kind of people that you're talking about? You know, those who are your devotees. How do they speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? So Krishna is talking about Sthita Prajna, and Arjuna wants to know what are the qualities of this Sthita Prajna. And Krishna says, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, And when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Krishna goes on, one who's not disturbed in the mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. And then comes the analogy that we discussed yesterday. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So now that Krishna has told Arjuna, who is the Sthita Prajna? What makes him so unique? Arjuna will come to his question. But interestingly, just to go back to 50, 51, 52, 53, I'll just give you a one sentence summary for this. So what is Krishna saying in 50? That by doing bhakti, you can get rid of all your past karmic reactions. In 51, Krishna is saying by doing bhakti, you can get rid of the cycle of birth and death. By doing bhakti, you become indifferent to karma kanda portion of the Vedic scriptures. That's in 52. By doing bhakti, your you attain divine consciousness. You go into samadhi. So Krishna is giving the benefits of bhakti in shlokas 50, 51, 52, 53. So with 53, the whole Buddhi Yoga section of chapter 2 concludes, and then Arjuna asks his questions. And Krishna answers this Sthita Prajna, how do they control their senses? How do they acquire taste, the higher taste? They've acquired a higher taste. So in this context of Sthita Prajna and the questions that Arjuna asks, the whole concept of lower taste and higher taste comes in. Why are some people attached to lower taste? Why are some people driven towards higher taste? And how does one become attracted to higher taste? And then Krishna talks about the chain reaction of why you should regulate your senses. So Krishna talks about how when you contemplate the object of senses, you develop attachment. This attachment, lust develops. If the desire is not fulfilled, then anger arises. And if you're angry, you're deluded. Delusion of the mind and the memory. That leads to bewilderment. And bewilderment leads to your loss of intelligence. And then if you've lost your intelligence, what else is there to do than to become a human animal again? And then Krishna comes back to the point of the Sthita Prajna again, how they are able to overcome all of this. And Krishna says here that one who's not connected with the Supreme can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? And in that context, the boat analogy appears. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Which means every boat, if the owner does not want the boat to go away into the sea, he has to drop the anchor in the water at the harbor. So Krishna is similarly saying, drop the anchor in the water. What is that anchor in the water? It's your spiritual practices. Your spiritual practices will help you manage your roaming senses. I think one of the questions came yesterday, how do you control your senses? through spiritual practices. And that then brings us to a few more interesting aspects, and we'll cover a few pastimes here. There is a time when there's a pastime of a famous Muni called Shaubari Muni. I will talk about the pastime and then I will talk about why am I relating this to chapter 2. So this Muni called Shaubari Muni used to do intense tapas underwater in the river Yamuna. Although it's a much lengthier pastime, I'm going to shorten it for the sake of creating that connection for chapter 2. So Garuda used to come to the river Yamuna to catch the fish there and eat them. That's the natural food for a bird. So the fishes approach Shaubari Muni because he's living underwater doing intense tapas. And they ask for protection from Garuda. And so, being angry, Shaubari Muni curses Garuda. And in the process, Garuda no longer comes there to feed on the fishes, and another personality comes to reside in that Yamuna river called Kalia. This Kalia is such a personality. He begins to pollute the river with his poison, and eventually all the fish die. The analogy here is that, or the understanding and takeaway is that material solutions for material problems will always be temporary. Material solutions to material problems will always be ineffective. It will always end up defeating you. So, this material solution was the curse by Shaubari Rishi on Garuda. He thought he was protecting the fish by cursing Garuda, but in the end, some other personality came there and killed the fish anyway through their poison. He ended up not being able to protect the fish because out of anger he curses Garuda. So if you look at the trajectory of this chapter, Krishna is actually saying in shlokas 31 to 37 that if Arjuna has a spiritual vision, he will have spiritual victory. Spiritual vision also leads to material victory. So from 31 to 37, spiritual vision leads to material victory. And from 38 to 56, when Krishna talks about Buddhi Yoga, spiritual vision also leads to spiritual victory. So ultimately, spiritual vision leads to material victory and spiritual victory both. Therefore, we have to pay attention to our Sanatana Dharma or Nitya Dharma, which is taking care of the soul. The same Shaubari Muni, when he watches the fish mate, he loses concentration and decides he should go and get married now. Now imagine the Rishi for many, many years was doing this intense meditation under the water so that he could not be distracted while he was on land. So he decides to do this tapas inside the water. But just a mere vision of two fish copulating was enough to break his tapas, and he decides I need to get married. And he goes to the king. He knows through his mystic power that the king has 50 beautiful young daughters. And Shaubari Muni approaches the king and says, I want to marry your daughters. And the king, knowing fully well that this shriveled old man, imagine if you've been meditating in the water, how your skin would be completely shriveled, looking like a prune. He was looking old, weak. He knew his 50 daughters would not accept marrying such an old man. So, recognizing this, Shaubari Muni, with his mystic power, turns himself into a beautiful, handsome young man. And through this process, he ends up marrying the 50 daughters. But one day, out of the causeless mercy of Krishna, he realizes what a fool he's been. He leaves behind all his 50 wives, goes back to doing tapas. There are many such pastimes from scriptures like this, of doing intense tapas and losing sight. As we were speaking yesterday, an addict is always an addict. Even if he's gone through a program, he's always thinking about what he used to be. So, so the curse for him, when he cursed Garuda, he committed an offense, and therefore he lost his concentration under the water. So when you interact incorrectly with the devotee of the Lord, then you have to pay a price immediately. Your sadhana gets disturbed, and that's what happened to Shaubari Rishi here. So one needs intelligence as well when we are practicing spirituality. We are not practicing spirituality to get a sense of pride for being so faithful and being so strong, etc. So we said the single word summary for chapter 2 is identity. Without knowing your identity, how do you know what is your duty and responsibility, or what your job description is? It's based on the ID card, you have your job description, right? So if your ID card says you're a spirit soul, what's your job description as a spirit soul? And if this ID card says you're a spirit soul occupying a human body, what is your job description? So when Rama and Lakshmana are searching for Sita Devi in the forests after she's kidnapped, Sugriva becomes very suspicious of these two new, young, beautiful men who have entered his land, his forest area where he is residing. He thinks they are actually agents of Ravana. So he sends Hanuman to test out who they are. So Hanuman disguises himself as a Brahmana and approaches Lord Ram and Lord Lakshmana. Even though Sugriva thinks that actually Vali may have sent a messengers to kill him. My apologies, not Ravana, it is actually Vali. So Hanuman comes in disguise, and the first person to ask a question was Hanuman. So Hanuman asks, "Who are you?" And the Lord identifies himself as the Supreme Lord. And the minute he uses the word Rama, Hanuman can no longer hide his disguise. He comes back into his original form, and he offers prostrated obeisances to the Lord, and he asks the Lord, how is it that I did not recognize you? I'm your devotee. How is it that I did not recognize you? To which the Lord says, the reason you didn't recognize me is because you are in disguise. Had you come in your original identity, you would have known who I was immediately. Because you covered your original identity, you could not recognize me. So, but the minute you heard my name, you could no longer maintain your disguise. That's when you recognized me. So, hearing the Lord's name can make one's duplicity fall away. Right? So, let's go to chapter 3. So, we said there is a connection between chapter 2 and 3, and we are going to discover that connection now. Chapter 3 is titled Karma Yoga, and we said the single word summary is duty, or you could look at it another way as your job description. So let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, why is Arjuna confused based on what Krishna has said in chapter 2? Krishna has said these Sthita Prajnas, they give up everything to meditate on me. And Arjuna is thinking, well, why can't I do the same thing? You're glorifying these devotees of yours. I also want to leave the battlefield and go into the forest and try to become a Sthita Prajna. And you're saying I should fight? On the one hand, you're saying becoming your devotee is the greatest thing. On the other hand, you're asking me to fight. You've confused me, Krishna. I really don't know. What is your instruction? Is your instruction for me to fight, or is your instruction for me to become your devotee? So we're going to look at what is the meaning of renunciation. There are two types of renunciation, Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. What Arjuna was attempting to do is called Falgu Vairagya because he was leaving for the forest prematurely without preparing himself. He was a Kshatriya pretending to be a Brahmana. That is Falgu Vairagya. False renunciation. Renunciation based on nonsense on the bodily platform. Krishna will come back to the topic of how by regulating all your activities, you can come to Yukta Vairagya. By regulating all your activities and leading an exemplary life, you can overcome lust. And by overcoming lust, you can become a Yukta Vairagya. So the acronym for today is TREE, Tyaga. So Arjuna asks, you ask me to fight, but at the same time you're saying these Sthita Prajnas are singularly focused on you. I also want to do that, but you're preventing me. So let's look at this. R for regulated activities, E for exemplary behavior, where Krishna will talk about leadership and what it means to be a leader. And Arjuna asks, yeah, even if you have acquired good qualities, sometimes you succumb to temptation. Why is that so? Arjuna asks. And Krishna will say that's because you have an enemy lurking within you called lust. So there is two types of renunciation, false renunciation and real renunciation. False renunciation. Krishna says, Karmendriyani sanyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityacharasa uchyate. He who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So Krishna is saying, hey Arjuna, you wanted to go into the forest. Do you know before you go to the forest, you have to actually qualify yourself? You have to train yourself. You have to purify your heart before you do all of this. You can't just change your clothes and decide you are a renounced person. It doesn't work that way, Arjuna. Therefore, what you're attempting to do is Falgu Vairagya. So, it is said in our scriptures that to become a sannyasi, one needs to have a purified heart. But to purify your heart, you need to perform austerities. So indirectly, Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are not qualified to practice Jnana Yoga. You are not qualified to become a sannyasi because you have not acquired the qualities that are necessary for you to be considered a sannyas. So, because you're not ready, my recommendation for you, Arjuna, you're not ready to do Dhyana Yoga or Jnana Yoga. My recommendation to you, Arjuna, based on what questions you've asked, is that you should focus on Karma Yoga. So, what is real renunciation? Krishna says, Yajnarthat karma nonyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. The first thing Krishna is saying here is all of us have to work. We don't have a choice. You have to work as a Kshatriya. You don't have a choice of going into the forest and prematurely giving up your duties and responsibilities. So why don't you continue your work, but do it as a sacrifice for me? Because if you work keeping me in mind, then there's no karmic reactions for you. You need not worry about anything. Then you will be free from bondage. So this Bhagavad Gita is not about leaving your family behind, going into the forest, becoming 100% full-time bhakta or something like that. It is about being in your current station in life and still learning how to practice bhakti yoga for the elevation of your own consciousness. So, what is the question that Arjuna began with? O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work. So, Krishna is saying, if I fight, you told me I can win and I will enjoy. That's karma kanda, right? That's working based on your desires, right? And then you told me about Buddhi Yoga. You said these great Sthita Prajnas go off and only focus on you, they give up everything material. So, after having said that, why are you asking me to fight and engage in this horrific war? And then again, Arjuna expresses his bewilderment and confusion. Arjuna says, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Which is, should I do Karma Kanda? Should I do Jnana Yoga? Which is better? Why cannot I use my intelligence to decide what I want to do? So then Krishna has to rectify Arjuna's misunderstanding here. So Krishna says in Shloka 4, not merely abstaining from work, one can achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone, one can attain perfection. Krishna is saying you want to abstain from your responsibilities. You think by abstaining from your responsibilities, there's no karmic reactions for that? You're wrong. You are ready to renounce everything. You think you have attained perfection simply by going off into the forest? You're wrong. So Krishna is saying either which way you look at it, you're wrong on both fronts. Not working doesn't mean there are no reactions for you. Renunciation also doesn't mean you suddenly become a nice, saintly person. So your external garb may change. You may have changed your external attire from a kshatriya to a sannyasi, but internally you're not a sannyasi, no? You cannot call yourself a sannyasi simply by changing your clothes, the color of your clothes. Internally, by qualities, you should exemplify that you are a sannyasi, that you are a renunciate. So Krishna is warning us about this. Sometimes we fool ourselves into false renunciation, thinking we are great. Krishna is saying you are actually truly renounced when you have actually worked on yourself through intense sadhana. But Krishna says actually there is an easy way out for you. Why don't you just work for me and I'll take care of everything? So in this particular shloka, Krishna is offering Arjuna a job. He's saying, don't work for yourself, work for me instead. If you work for yourself, there is bondage. If you work for me, there is no bondage. It's as simple as that. Very tempting offer. Let's see if Arjuna takes up this job offer. Then Krishna talks about regulating one's activities. Yajnishishtashinasantah muchyante sarvakil vishaihi bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatmakaranat. And Krishna is going to give some small examples of how you can regulate yourself. Remember, we said to purify your heart. I mean, you have to have a pure heart to become a sannyasi or a renunciate. And to develop a pure heart, you first have to begin with some austerity. Some sadhana has to be there. Krishna is giving one such example. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Krishna is saying, my devotees know all the tricks in the book. They know if they work for me, they are free from all sin. They know whatever they eat, if they offer it to me, they are freed from all sin. Others who want to enjoy themselves, they cook for themselves all nice dishes. They forget that I have given them everything. They forget to offer that bhoga. Well, what are they doing? They may be eating nice food, but they are also eating a lot of sin. So then Krishna talks about the yoga ladder because Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to focus on karma yoga rather than becoming prematurely renunciate. So the other confusion for Arjuna here is that he is thinking that Jnana Yoga is a different path, Karma Yoga is a different path, Bhakti Yoga is a different path, Sakama Karma Yoga, the two divisions of yoga within Karma Yoga, Sakama and Nishkama, they are all different paths. In the sense, directionally, they are all opposite, opposing each other. So Krishna has to take time to explain to Arjuna that actually this yoga is a ladder system. All of us have to begin somewhere on this ladder. We may be on the bottommost rung, which is within the concept of yoga. This is called the Karma Kanda portion, where you're not trying to do any yoga with the Lord here. You only want to enjoy yourself. But as you go higher up the ladder, yes, you may want to enjoy yourself, but at the same time, you want to do it as per the scriptural boundaries. That's called Sakama Karma Yoga, which is you are attached to the work and you are attached to the outcome. In Karma Kanda, you are attached to the outcome alone and you are willing to do anything for that outcome. So, what is Nishkama Karma Yoga? Here, you are deeply attached to your work as a sense of duty, but you have zero interest in the results. So much so you reject the results. But you're attached to your work. So, the whole Vedic system is designed in such a way that this is actually a ladder. Of course, beyond Karma Yoga comes Jnana Yoga, then Dhyana Yoga, and then Bhakti Yoga. But there is a shortcut. If you simply add Krishna into the picture for Karma Yoga, you become a Bhakta. So you skip 2 rungs and go to becoming a Bhakta. Otherwise, it's a ladder. You can just consider it a double promotion. When you add Krishna to the picture, suddenly you become a devotee. So then, devotional service. Yadyadacharate shreshtaha tat evetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastadanu vartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standard he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Krishna is reminding Arjuna, you are in a leadership position. Don't do something stupid and foolish, because if you do something, then it becomes a license for others to do the same stupid and foolish things. Since you are in a leadership role, shouldn't you be a little bit careful about your actions, Arjuna? Don't you have to set the standards, Arjuna, for the rest of society? Therefore, don't do anything hasty without thinking. In that context, all of us are playing leadership roles. If you're a parent, you're a leader at home. Your child is learning from you. If you're a teacher, the students are learning from you. Not just the subject matter, but also about your morality and ethics. Heads of states are leaders. Hence, all of us are expected to behave in a responsible and exemplary manner, because whatever we do, others will follow. So, leadership is not just a formal title. Everybody can be a leader in their own way, in their own small spaces. Which brings us back to the concept of Guru, and this is going to connect to the 4th chapter. So, we have to use the principles taught by the Gita to identify a proper teacher. Only a proper student can become a proper teacher. We use the words bona fide parampara system. How do you know who's a real guru, who's a fake guru? And in one of the questions that was asked yesterday, I said, a bona fide guru is anxious to connect you back with Krishna. He will hold your hands and take you back to Krishna. Any other guru will say, come on, chant this mantra, give me this much money, you will become unbelievably wealthy. I will take away the curse that other people have laid on you. This is a false guru. A real guru recognizes that he himself is a servant of Krishna, and he has come here to rescue you from this obnoxious place called Martyaloka, the place that is temporary and full of distress. So, a real guru is anxious, is so compassionate. He is ready to go through all kinds of sacrifice just so he can pick you up from the gutter and put you on the path and send you back home to Krishna. That's a real guru. Of course, there are other ways in which you can discover who's a real guru. We'll talk about that as well. So, why should each one of us perform a prescribed duty and not pretend to do somebody else's duty very perfectly? Because if a Kshatriya pretends to be a Brahmana, again, then you are disturbing the societal fabric. Again, society will disintegrate if a Kshudra becomes a leader. a leader has to be trained up on how to be a leader. So when you violate this principle of doing somebody else's duty, in the sense you have accepted some other ID card that doesn't match your skill set, that doesn't match your natural qualities, that also creates instability in society. So this whole social fabric itself gets disturbed. Therefore, Krishna says quite a few times in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, I prefer that you be an ineffective Kshatriya than a perfect Brahmana, because you have not qualified yourself to become a Brahmana, but you're pretending to be perfect. My preference, Arjuna, is you be a Kshatriya, but be a imperfect Kshatriya. At least sincerely you're trying to perform your duties. That is what matters to me. And then Arjuna says, okay, I've heard you talk about leaders and leadership role and why my actions matter in society. And then Arjuna asks the question, even great leaders make mistakes. Even great leaders fall down. They may make the incorrect decision. So Arjuna asks this question. Even though I know the best course of action, but what is it that impels me to act improperly and act against my good intelligence? So Arjuna is asking this question on your behalf and my behalf. Sometimes even we lose sight of what is right and wrong. And then we degrade our consciousness. And then it takes a long time for us to pull ourselves back up again. So Krishna says, Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidhenam iha vairinam. Krishna is saying, actually, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Krishna is saying this whole world is run on lust. The word lust means any desire that you have, any material desire that you have. I want to become wealthy. I want to be most intelligent. I want to be most beautiful. I want to be popular. I want to be powerful. All this is lust. So, because of this lust, we become obsessed with obtaining certain results. And therefore, then Krishna uses the three analogies. He says, lust is like a mirror covered by dust, fire covered by smoke, an embryo covered in the womb. So these are different degrees of lust that leads to different intensity of karmic reactions. Mirror covered by dust, you can still see the mirror, you can see the dust. If you just wipe away the dust, you can see yourself. Whereas fire, which is covered by smoke, until the smoke dissipates, you really can't see the fire. And the embryo that is tightly constricted in the womb, it cannot even move. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that this mirror covered by dust is an analogy for human beings. Fire covered by smoke is an analogy for people being in animal bodies. An embryo covered in the womb is analogy for non-moving things, living things like trees. So the kind of lust that you have also determines your future body. And Krishna says, Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nitya vairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. It's like, when you itch, the itch that place only becomes worse and you want to itch it even more, scratch it even more, and then you damage the skin even more. So essentially Krishna is saying, the more we satisfy our selfish desires, the more we get constrained in our life. Better to let go of material desires. So obviously the next question is, okay, if lust is our enemy, what's the plan? How do you defeat this enemy? Well, first of all, if you want to locate your enemy, you need to know where he's hiding. Krishna says, the hiding place for this lust is your senses, mind, and intelligence. This is where lust is hiding. So find the enemy, defeat the enemy. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Which means lust steals away your discriminatory power, your intelligence, and therefore you're not able to make the right decisions. So plan number one, where's the enemy hiding? Plan number two, regulate the senses again. Of the three, the senses are easiest to control. Of the three means of the senses, mind, and intelligence. Because they are the grossest, you can see, right? Mind and intelligence cannot be seen. It's harder to control the mind and intelligence. Maybe it's a little easier for us to control our physical cells, the gross elements. So what is battle plan number 3? For knowledge, strengthen the intelligence by chanting, hearing, reading, discussing, and applying Shastra. So Krishna says, yes, lust is a eternal, Vairinam, Krishna says, eternal enemy. It'll always be your enemy, but that does not mean you cannot overcome it. How do you overcome it? By practicing sadhana. So in ISKCON, we have a simple ABCD formula. This brings us to the last slide for today. How do you control your anger? How do you control your speech when you get angry? How do you control all the other anarthas that we have? Simple formula, ABCD. One is associate with the right people. Associate with people who are practicing spirituality. Because from them you will catch on. The fastest way to become a drunkard is to hang out with other drunkards. Then you yourself, Prabhupada says, will eventually become a drunkard. It won't take too long before you begin drinking. So the positive side also applies. So if you want to get rid of your negative tendencies, then hang out with positive people. Positive people here we're talking about people who are in the Sattvagun at a minimum stage. B for books, read the scriptures and nothing else. Yeah, if based on your work you may have to read some mundane things, keep it. But do not go out of your way to read literature that has nothing to do with, that can enhance your consciousness. So reading scriptures every day is necessary. C for chanting. In Kali Yuga, the Yuga Dharma is to chant the holy names of the Lord. We can go back to Shripad Adi Shankaracharya's instructions for us. If at all there is one book we should read the Bhagavad Gita every day. If at all there is one Lord we should worship, it should be Lord Krishna. As if at all there is one mantra we should chant his names, Lord Hari's names. If at all there is one duty we should prioritize serving Krishna. So chanting is the Kali Yuga Dharma. Different yugas have different dharmas. So in Satya Yuga, you had to meditate to go back to the spiritual world. And meditation took thousands and thousands of years to perfect yourself. In Kali Yuga, our lifespan is very short. In Satya Yuga, people used to live for 1 lakh years. Lifespan was very, 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 very long. In Treta Yuga, the process for self-realization was performing yajnas. Actually, Krishna describes various types of yajnas in chapter 3. It's very interesting. Different types of sacrifices, and not all yajnas involve fire. Usually, when we use the word yajna, immediately we think of fire sacrifice. But Krishna in this chapter talks about how you can observe different kinds of austerities in order to regulate your senses, mind, and intelligence. And in that process, I think the Lord talks about how many different types of yajnas. I don't remember, maybe 23, 24. I'll have to double check that. Different kinds of austerities that are considered fireless yajnas. So chanting the holy names of the Lord is a Kali Yuga dharma. In Dwapar Yuga, in Treta Yuga, a human being could live up to 10,000 years. So even in Treta Yuga, they had a long lifespan. So therefore, yajnas used to be performed for many hundreds of years. In Dwapar Yuga, the Yuga dharma was to worship the deities of the Lord that were installed in sacred places and within the premises of a temple. So in Dwapar Yuga, the way to go back to the spiritual world was deity worship. But in Kali Yuga, deity worship will disappear sometime in the future. We hope not too soon. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, at the end, we will be only left with the holy names of the Lord, because everything else will be lost. So chanting the holy names of the Lord is the Yuga Dharma in Kali Yuga. And diet and deity worship. I said deity worship is for Dwapar Yuga, but we are practicing deity worship even in Kali Yuga under the instructions of great acharyas. Diet, watch what you eat as much as possible. You should restrict your food to what has been offered to the Lord. And what can you offer to the Lord? Well, you'll find out in chapter 9 what you can offer to the Lord. Because if you want to please the Lord, we have to learn to offer Him what pleases Him. And Krishna will tell you what pleases Him in terms of what you can offer Him. So we said today's acronym is TREE. We began with the concept of Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya, real renunciation versus false renunciation. We have to we have to stop trying to enjoy ourselves. Rather, we should try to please Krishna. And anything that satisfies Krishna is considered Yukta Vairagya. That is, you can use even material objects to serve Krishna. Even that will please Krishna. How do you regulate your activities? What is sinful activity? What is sinless and godless? Then what is karma kanda, all the rituals, and then the yoga ladder. What are the qualities of leadership? Whom do we follow? And who's our enemy? Who's trying to distract us from all these objectives? It's our own lust. So we have to find this enemy. Where does this enemy reside? In our mind, senses, and intelligence. And each of those can be easily addressed. The mind and intelligence. What satisfies the mind is chanting. What satisfies the intelligence is reading the scriptures. And what satisfies the senses is to engage all the senses in the services of Krishna. Using your eyes to take darshan of the Lord. Using your ears to hear kirtan. Using your mouth to taste prasadam. Using your nose to smell the tulsi that's been offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. Like this, using your skin to come in contact and take the association of devotees. In this way, even the senses can be engaged in serving the Lord. So today's summary, one-word summary is duty. Now that Krishna has established Arjuna's identity in chapter 2 as the spirit soul, that is residing in a human body. Krishna is now articulated to Arjuna all the duties and responsibilities he has as a Kshatriya, as a leader, how he needs to perform austerities in order to purify himself. But the fastest way to purify oneself, Krishna says, is simply by working for me. Which means do everything for the pleasure of Krishna, not for your own pleasure. If you put Krishna first, Krishna will put you first. If you take one step towards Krishna, Krishna will take 100 steps towards you. So in tomorrow's chapter, which is called Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, transcendental knowledge, we look at this knowledge where the Lord is going to define the science of the soul, the science of the super soul, and the science of the relationship between Jivatma and Paramatma. Krishna will talk about in chapter 4. Knowing this is very important. In order to perform your job, you need to have some knowledge, some qualifications, some skills. So if you want to perform your duty perfectly for the pleasure of Krishna, then you need to know who is Krishna. You need to know who you are. You need to know what's your relationship with Krishna. If you don't have this knowledge, how can you do your duty perfectly? Therefore, join us tomorrow. We'll learn about Jivatma, Paramatma, and the relationship between the two, and why it is so important in order to perform your duty towards Krishna so nicely.